Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a hand from a $5,000 World Series of Poker event that I final tabled at the last World Series of Poker. If you've not watched the previous two videos I've made here on Poker News, definitely check those out. Those were from this same tournament. Here, we have 100,000 chips. That's a lot. At 400, 800. And we are in the big blind with 5-4 offsuits. It's typically not what you want to have, but it's what we have this time. So it folds around to a good, tight, aggressive kid who makes it 1,600 on the button. And especially when there are antes in play, you should not blindly fold to min raises or really any raise size. You always want to be thinking, can I profitably defend in this scenario? And you have to recognize we're putting in a relatively small amount, 800, to try to win his 1,600 plus the 400 small blind plus the 800 big blind plus the 900 antes. So we're getting incredibly good pot odds. As long as we do not lose gigantic pots in this scenario, we can defend with a relatively wide range. 5-4 offsuit's pretty bad, but it's not the worst. You could re-raise this hand pre-flop. I think that would be okay. I also don't think folding is so bad with 5-4. 5-4 is, in reality, a pretty junky hand. If you are defending with stuff like 5-4, you want to have the ability to lead into your opponent with a somewhat wide range on the flop, and also the ability to check raise with a somewhat wide range. So if I am calling with 5-4, I recognize I'm going to be taking stabs at this pot. Anytime I get any sort of equity, like a gut shot or better, I'm going to be trying to steal this pot. Also, I may even try to check raise on a board like 10-9-9 as it comes here. I would probably just check fold this one, but imagine it comes instead 8-8-7, 7-7-6, 6-7-7, same things. Like the opposite of those. Anytime there are a bunch of middle cards, that's usually much better for the caller than the initial raiser. And that's just because people tend to re-raise with their best hands. And if they are only calling, it takes a lot of those best hands out of their range, which makes the middle card boards better for me than my opponent. But of course, my opponent is a good, tight, aggressive kid, so he's probably raising all sorts of stuff from the button. I want to make it clear that when I say he's a tight, aggressive kid, that does not mean an incredibly tight kid. It just means, good, tight, aggressive player who knows to raise a reasonably wide range from the button. So it goes check-check on the flop. When it goes check-check on the flop, that usually means my opponent has either a marginal showdown hand, like pocket sixes or ace-queen, or it means he has nothing, like king-queen, king-4, maybe a hand like ace-4 that's starting to become somewhat marginal. Maybe even has something like 6-5, maybe has queen-4. You can just have all sorts of random suited hands, or maybe even unsuited. He decided to raise the button and then give up on this flop. So I don't think that he necessarily has the marginal showdown value hands. Also, some players will check behind with a hand like a 10, or maybe even a 9 in the spot if they think that I, the defender, will be willing to bet the turn and bet the river with an incredibly wide range to try to make him fold his, quote-unquote, obviously marginal hand. So it's important to figure out what level your opponent's thinking on. Some players will always bet with a 10 or a 9 in the spot, and some players never will. So try to figure that out by focusing on your opponents and paying attention to what's happening at the table. So the turn's a 3 of spades. I now have a bad flush draw, but more importantly, my opponent did check behind on the flop. So now I want to ask myself, how would I play if I had a 10 or a 9? And I would typically make relatively small bets, probably half pot or less, between 1/3 and 1/2 pot. And I do bet half pot in this scenario. I think this is fine. And when you make this half pot bet, you have to realize that your opponent's going to call almost every time whenever he has the ace highs or the pocket sixes. So I would actually think that this bet on the turn is going to lose a lot of money. However, if we bet again on the river, that bet's going to steal the pot a huge portion of the time if my opponent does not have a 10 or better, or maybe something like pocket 8s or 7s or better. So I like to bet 2,200 here, and I already know ahead of time I'm going to be betting almost every river. So the river's a 2, not really what I want to see. I would much rather the board have changed. When the board changes, like say the river's a jack 10, king, queen, ace, maybe even an 8, maybe a 7, those make it to where my opponent will fold some of the hands he's going to call with. Whenever the 2 comes, he may just call every time with pocket sixes or even ace, queen. So I don't know if this is the best spot to bluff, but I think it's okay. I decide to bet 4,000, 1/3 pot, and I think this bet size is fine. This is exactly how I would play a 10 or a 9. It's very important to try to figure out how would I play those reasonably strong hands. And this is exactly what I would do, because I would be trying to get called by ace high or, the marginal pairs. Let's see what he called me with. He did call. He did have king 10. So in this scenario, I think my opponent actually played his hand incredibly well. He did not want to get check raised on this flop, right? Whenever you have king 10, you don't really want to get check raised on 10-9-9 with 2 spades. So by checking behind, he induces me to bluff with a wide range. He doesn't let me fold with my wide range. Notice if he just bets the flop, like I said, I was probably going to fold. And also, he has a pretty easy bluff catch on the turn in the river on almost all runouts besides 2 spade runouts or like a queen and an ace runout, something like that. So he's probably gonna be able to bluff catch almost every time. So this was a very well played hand by my opponent. A lot of people just continuation bet top pair, not really thinking what can I get called by. And a lot of people are overly concerned with getting outdrawn. Notice we did have some equity to outdraw our opponents, but in reality, we were drawing very, very thin on the flop. So my opponent took advantage of my tendency to bluff. He made a good assessment there, and he owned me. So shame a spade did not come on the river. If a spade came on the river, improving me to a bad flush, I would have checked and probably check called, maybe check folded. I don't really know. That would have been a game time decision. But this hand is more so to illustrate that checking behind on the flop with a reasonable hand is a very good play versus someone who is aggressive. So well played by my opponent. I think that he played it perfectly, and he got me to fall right into the trap. I hope you enjoyed this hand. Make sure to check back next time. We're going to have another hand from this $5,000 buy-in World Series of Poker event that I final tabled. So be sure to check back here at pokernews.com.